You have probably seen an AI assistant do something that feels impossible for a chatbot. You ask it for the weather, and it tells you it is raining in your city right now. You ask it to add something to your calendar, and the event actually appears. But here is the thing that confused me for the longest time. A language model, on its own, cannot check the weather. It cannot touch your calendar. It cannot do anything in the real world at all. All it can do is produce text. So how does it pull this off? The answer is a mechanism called function calling, and once it clicks, a huge amount of the mystery around AI agents just falls away. In the next 12 minutes, I am going to explain exactly how it works, in plain language with no hand waving. By the end, you will understand the thing that quietly powers almost every serious AI tool out there. First, what the model can and cannot do. Let me start by killing the biggest misconception, because everything else depends on it. A language model does exactly one thing. It takes in text and it predicts more text. That is the whole job. It has no hands. It cannot open a web page. It cannot run a program. It cannot read a file off your disk. When it feels like the model just looked something up, it did not. Something else did the looking, and the model only handled the words around it. This matters because it tells you where the real boundary is. The model lives entirely inside a world of text, and anything that actually happens in the real world, fetching data, sending an email, running a calculation, happens outside the model in ordinary code that you control. Function calling is simply the bridge between those two worlds. It is how a thing that can only talk gets to reach into a world it cannot touch, safely and through you. You describe the tools to it, so the first step happens before you even ask your question. You give the model a menu. You describe the tools it is allowed to use. Each tool gets a name, like get weather, a short description of what it does, like returns the current weather for a city, and a list of the inputs it needs, like a city name. You are not giving the model the code. You are giving it a description of the code, written in plain terms it can read. Think of it like handing someone a room service menu. The menu does not contain a kitchen. It just tells you what you are allowed to order and what information they need from you to make it. The model reads this menu of tools alongside your actual question, and now it knows what is on the table. It knows that if a question needs leave weather, there is a thing called get weather it could ask for. It still cannot run that thing itself, but it knows the thing exists and it knows what to call it. The model asks, it does not act. Here is the part that surprised me most, and it is the heart of the whole idea. When the model decides a tool is needed, it does not run the tool. It cannot. Instead, it writes out a request. It produces a little structured message that says, in effect, please run get weather with the city set to Singapore. And then it stops and it waits. That is it. That is the entire act of, quote, calling a function. The model is not calling anything. It is asking politely and in a very specific format for someone else to do the calling. It is like writing your order down on the slip and handing it to the waiter. You have not cooked anything. You have just clearly stated what you want. This is the single most important thing to understand because it tells you that the model never has direct power over anything. The most it can ever do is ask. Whether that request actually gets carried out is entirely up to the code on the other side, which is yours. Your code runs the tool, so now the model has handed over a request. Who actually does the work? Your program does. This is the real boundary, the place where text turns into action. Your code receives that structured request, sees that the model wants get weather for Singapore, and then it runs the actual function. Real code that you wrote, that makes a real call to a real weather service and gets back a real answer. The model is not in the room for any of this. It is sitting outside, waiting, while ordinary software does the thing it asked for. And because you wrote this part, you are completely in control of it. You can check the request before you run anything. You can refuse it. You can decide that some tools need your explicit approval before they fire. The model proposes, but your code disposes, and that gap between asking and doing is exactly where all of the safety lives. Nothing happens that your own code did not choose to actually carry out. The result goes back in. Now we close the loop. Your code ran the weather tool and got an answer back, something like, it is 28 degrees and raining. What happens to that answer? You hand it back to the model as more text basically saying, here is the result of the tool you asked for. And now the model, which still only knows how to do one thing, predicting text, takes that fresh information and uses it to write a natural reply. It turns "it is 28 degrees and raining" into a friendly sentence like, "Looks like you will want an umbrella today. It is raining in Singapore." The model never saw the weather service. It just asked for a number. You went and got it, and you handed it back so the model could talk about it. The magic that looks like the model checking the weather is really this little round trip happening in well under a second. Let me walk the whole round trip. Let me put the whole thing in one straight line, because seeing it end to end is what makes it stick. You ask, "What is the weather in Singapore?" The model reads your question and the menu of tools, and instead of answering, it emits a request to run "get weather for Singapore." Your code catches that request and runs the real weather function, which returns 28 degrees and raining. Your code feeds that result back to the model. The model reads it and writes the final friendly answer for you. Ask, request, run, return, reply. 5 steps, 1 loop, and the only 2 things the model ever did were the first half, deciding a tool was needed and asking for it, and the last half, turning the result into words. Everything in between, the part that actually touched the real world, was plain code that you wrote and you control. Once you see those 5 steps, you can never quite unsee them, and every AI tool starts to look a lot less like magic. Why this design is actually safe. Before I get to the safety, let me clear up one thing that trips people up, which is the word calling itself. When we say the model called a function, it sounds like the model reached out and ran some code, the way one part of a program calls another. That is not what happens, and the name is honestly a bit misleading. The model does not call anything. It generates a piece of text that describes a call it would like to happen. That is a completely different thing. It is the difference between pressing a button yourself and writing a note that says, "Please press this button." The model only ever writes the note. So anytime you hear function calling or tool use or any of the fancier names for this, just remember that underneath all of it, the model is doing the one thing it can do, producing text, and that text just happens to be a request in a format your code knows how to read. Once that lands, the whole thing stops feeling like the model has spooky powers and starts feeling like exactly what it is, which is a very good writer filling out a very specific form. I want to dwell on why this setup is reassuring, not scary. Because the model can only ever ask, it has no direct power over your systems at all. It cannot reach into your files or your accounts. The only things it can do are the specific tools you chose to describe to it, and even then only by requesting them through your code, which gets the final say every time. If you never give it a tool that deletes things, it has no way to delete anything, no matter what it generates. It is a bit like a very capable assistant who can fill out request forms all day but does not have keys to any of the doors. You hold the keys. That boundary is not an accident. It is the entire design, and it is why thoughtful AI tools feel safe to use even when the model behind them is doing surprisingly clever things. The cleverness lives in the asking. The power stays with you. So where does it go wrong? Now the honest part, because this does break in real ways. The model can ask for the wrong tool. You wanted the weather, and it decides to run a search instead, because your descriptions were unclear. It can ask for a tool with bad inputs, like a city you never mentioned, because it misread your question. And if you let it, it can get stuck in a loop, asking for tool after tool, never quite deciding it is done. The fixes are not mysterious. You write clear tool descriptions, the same way clear instructions to a person get better results. You check the inputs before you run anything, because the request is a suggestion, not a command. And you put a hard limit on how many times the loop can run, so it can never spin forever. None of this is exotic. It is the ordinary, careful work of wiring a clever thing into real systems without letting it do something dumb at full speed. So why this is the foundation of agents? There is one more thing worth knowing, which is how the model decides to ask for a tool in the first place. It is not following a rigid set of rules that say if the question mentions weather, call the weather tool. It is doing the same thing it always does, which is reading everything in front of it, your question and the menu of tools, and predicting what should come next. And when the most natural next thing is a tool request, that is what it produces. This is why clear tool descriptions matter so much. The model is essentially reading your menu the way it reads everything, and if your description of a tool is vague, It will guess, sometimes wrongly, about when to reach for it. Give it a sharp, plain description of what each tool is for, and it picks the right one far more often, for exactly the same reason a person hands you the right thing when you label the boxes clearly. There is no magic decision engine in there. It is the same text prediction pointed at the question of which tool fits. Pointed at, here is the payoff for understanding all of this. An AI agent, the thing everyone is excited about, is not some new and separate kind of magic. It is just this exact loop run over and over. The model asks for a tool, your code runs it, the result goes back, and instead of stopping, the model looks at that result and asks for the next tool and the next, working through a task one request at a time. And that protocol you keep hearing about, the one for connecting AI to outside tools, is mostly just a shared standard way of describing those tools so any model can read the menu. It is all the same 5 steps underneath. So if you genuinely understand this one loop, ask, request, run, return, reply, you understand the engine inside almost every serious AI product being built right now. It really is that fundamental, and it really is that simple once the mystery is gone. So should you care about this? Would I say everyone needs to know this? If you only ever use AI as a chatbot, you can happily skip it. But if you want to build anything with AI, or even just understand what these tools are really doing when they act on your behalf, this is the one concept that unlocks the rest. It took me embarrassingly long to realize the model never actually does anything. It only ever asks. And once that clicked, agents and tools and all the rest stopped being intimidating. They are just this loop, repeated, with you holding the keys the whole time. I am going to keep breaking down the ideas behind AI in plain language like this. No hype and no jargon walls. If that is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe and follow along, because there is a lot more coming. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.